Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, sir.
Okay, so let's get started. Okay, first going to start with the recap of chapter 1 and 2. I'm going to focus on the main points. Okay, then we move to chapter 3. So, a definition of syntax. So, as you know, syntax that is the arrangement of words. Okay, how words are combined together to form phrases and to form sentences or clauses. Okay, so syntax is about the way how words are grouped together to form phrases, to form sentences and clauses. Okay, and of course there are certain syntactic rules that we have to follow to words together. So we do not arrange or group words together arbitrarily. Okay, similar to phonology, morphology, etc. There are certain syntactic constraints, rules that we have to follow. And as you know, some words go together while other words don't, as we'll see. So before covering chapter 3, we have to define certain technical terms. First, difference between open and closed parts of speech. Okay, so open parts of speech, they are called open because they are open to modification, changes. Okay, they are open to affixations. Okay, for example, if we take the word, for example, the word communication, so you can say communicative, you can say communicational, so you can add suffixes, you can add prefixes to the words. Okay, so these words are nouns. Okay, and for example, verbs. Okay, you can add suffixes or affixes in general. You can add affixes to them. You can add a prefix or suffix or an infix. Okay, etc. While closed parts of speech are not liable to modification to affixes. Okay, so you, for example, prepositions, articles. So to the preposition in, for example, you cannot add a prefix or a suffix to the preposition in. So we say that this preposition is a closed part of speech, okay? Because you cannot add affixes to them, okay? So lexical and functional parts of speech. Okay, so lexical parts of speech provide the content. Okay, the content, the meaning. For example, nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and verbs indicate a certain meaning. Okay, for example, when we say school, it indicates a certain meaning which exists in the external world. Okay, so lexical parts of speech provide meaning, the content. Okay, while functional parts of speech they are specifically used for uh, grammatical reasons. Okay, they are used for grammatical reasons. Okay, for example, when we use prepositions, articles, etc., so we simply use them for grammatical reasons. Okay, so functional parts of speech are used for grammatical reasons, not indicate meaning. So the second point is about the difference between language with capital L, okay, and language with small letter L, okay. So a language with capital L refers to the psychological ability of humans to to produce and understand a particular language, also called human language capacity or I language. Okay, so language with capital L refers to the innate ability to produce language, to understand a particular language. As Chomsky says, this is the ability, the innate ability that every normal human being is born with. Okay, so this is the meaning of language with capital L. It refers to the innate, to tacit, to the dormant knowledge that we are born with. Okay, the innate ability of every normal child to produce language, to understand a particular language. Okay, a language with small letter, with lowercase l or small letter l refers to any individual language, languages that we speak, that we write, etc. So those languages are referred to by using language with small letter. It refers to English, French, Moroccan Arabic, etc. Okay, so it is also called e-language. Okay, e-language. So now it's clear the difference between language with capital L and language with small letter l. Okay, now we move to the argument structure. Argument structure refers to the number of arguments that a predicate takes. So the is predicate is the verb and what comes after the verb, and we are going to focus on the verb itself. And the arguments are the complement a verb takes, including the subjects. Okay, the arguments refer to the complements that the verb takes, including the subject. We'll see examples. So the arguments are the entities that are participating in the predicate relation. So arguments, the complements, etc. The arguments, the complements including subject. So they participate, okay, in predicate relation, as we will see. For example, intransitive verbs, as you know, do not require an object. Okay, they do not require an object. You can take many examples. Okay, for example, he smokes, he slept early, he went early, etc. So these verbs are intransitive because they do not require an object. Okay, they do not require an object. So they require only one argument, which is the subject. Okay, for example, he smokes. So the verb smoke requires only the subject. Of course, you have to pay attention because some verbs can be intransitive in a certain context and can be transitive in another context. For example, the verb smoke. We can say he smokes. We know that he smokes, or he smokes 5 cigarettes a day. So in the second meaning, the verb smoke is transitive. Okay? So the verbs that are intransitive take only the subject as an argument. So they have one argument. Okay? While transitive verbs, especially transitive verbs take two arguments, the subject and the direct object. The direct object and the subject. Okay, for example, if we take the verb eat, I ate an apple. So the verb eat requires two arguments, the subject I and the direct object an apple. If we take another example, for example, he booked, okay, for example, an apartment. So he is the subject, an apartment is the object. So the verb to book, okay, requires two arguments, the subject and the direct object. Ditransitive verbs ditransitive verbs require 3 arguments. So what are ditransitive verbs? These are the verbs that require the direct object and the indirect object. Okay, for example, the verb give, okay, the verb call, okay, the verb give, the verb put. So not all ditransitive verbs require the direct and indirect object. But what is important is that they require 2 complements. For example, the verb put. So I put the book on the table. So we cannot say that one is direct object and one is indirect object. Okay? So let's say 2 complements. So we cannot simply say I gave her and full stop. No. Why? Because the verb give requires 3 arguments, the subject and 2 complements, 2 objects. Okay? And the verb put, we cannot say I put it. So we have to say I put it on the table, I put it somewhere. So I put the book on the table. So there must be 3 arguments. The first argument is the subject, and the 2 other arguments are the complements or the objects. Okay? So I repeat, intransitive verbs require only one argument, which is the subject. Transitive verbs require 2 arguments, the subject and the direct object. Ditransitive verbs require 3 arguments, the subject and 2 objects. Okay? Or 2 complements. One further, okay, one further type of verbs is complex transitive. Okay, it's not related to syntax, but I'm just going to explain it. So complex transitive verb is a verb that requires an object and the object complement. Okay, for example, for example, they let's say they elected him the president. Okay, they elected him the president. Okay, they elect him the president. So let's talk about the syntactic categories and functions. So they elected him. So what is the function of him? Him is the object of the verb elect. And what about president? They elected him the president. So the president defines or modifies him. It says something about him. It has nothing to do with the verb. Okay, it says something about him. They elected him the president. So the president is complement of the object. Okay, so in this case, the verb elect is not intransitive, is not monotransitive, is not ditransitive. It is complex transitive. Okay, because we have the object and the object complement. Another example: they painted the wall blue. So they painted wall. So the wall is the direct object. What about blue? Blue completes the meaning of the wall. So they painted the wall blue. So the wall is direct object and blue is complex. It completes the meaning of the wall. So this is object complement. Okay, so we are specifically going to talk about intransitive, ditransitive, and transitive verbs, and we're going to consider complex transitive verbs as simply transitive verbs. Okay, now we move to generative grammar. It's a theory of linguistics in which grammar is viewed as a cognitive faculty. Language is generated by a set of rules or procedures. So as you know, look at the word generative. So it means that this theory claims that from a limited number of rules, we can come up with non-finite sentences. Have you ever asked this question? how can we produce non-finite sentences and we have a limited set of rules? Okay, we have also a limited number of letters. How many letters in English? Okay, how many letters in Arabic? So the number of the letters is very limited, and the number of rules is very limited. However, as Chomsky says, because of LAD, language acquisition device, etc., we are capable of generating, this is the meaning of generative grammar, we are capable of generating non-finite sentences from a limited set of rules thanks to language acquisition device. Okay, now if we apply this theory to syntax or phonology, let's take an example from phonology. The simple past, for example, regular past morpheme. Sometimes it is pronounced sh, t, for example, finished. So ed is pronounced t. And sometimes it is pronounced d, for example, loved. And sometimes pronounced id or id, which va, wanted, wanted. So we have three variations of the regular past morpheme. Sometimes it's pronounced sometimes d, sometimes id. It depends on the phonological context. If it is preceded by a voiceless sound, it is articulated as t. If it is preceded by a voice sound, it is articulated as t. If it is preceded by an alveolar sound, then it is articulated as id to avoid a cluster of two sounds that have the same point of articulation. So, what structuralists do is simply to account for these variations. It is articulated as d after voiceless sounds, as d after voice sounds, etc. So this is what structuralists do. However, generativist, and this is what we are talking about, generative grammar. So generativist, what they do is to ask this question: which of these variations, t, the, and id, which one is the underlying? Which one that we have in our mind, from which the other irregular forms are derived? This is the reason why it is called generative grammar. You should know how to apply it when you are analyzing a certain data. So if we have a certain data and we are doing a structuralist uh, framework analysis, then we have simply to account for the distribution of the data. But not doing a generative analysis, then you have to find the basic one, which one is the underlying, and you come up with the rules that generate the surface structure. You have to move from deep structure to the surface structure to generate the surface form. This is the reason why it is called generative grammar, because you generate the surface structure from the deep structure, coming up with the transformational rules. Okay, and also from a limited set of rules, you can come up with non-finite sentences, even those that you've never been exposed to or you've never heard. Now, Chomsky asked a very interesting question. Chomsky, a very interesting question, which is, how come the children, for example, come up with certain words, that certain words or phrases that they have never been exposed to and they have never heard? It was like an attack to the behaviorist, because, as you know, the behaviorists claim that language, okay, that language is simply a result of imitation, okay, is simply a result of exposure. However, as Chomsky says, thanks to LAD, that children, for example, come up with certain words and phrases that they have never been exposed to and they have never heard, which means that language acquisition is not simply a result of imitation, which means that children generate, come up with sentences or phrases or words that are not due to exposure. Okay, anyhow, this is not our concern. I'm just explaining the meaning of generative grammar in applied linguistics, in phonology, in syntax, etc. And the main concern within generative grammar is also the principles and parameters. So generative grammar tries to come up with the universal. What do you mean by principles? Principles, the word refers to those universal characteristics of languages, those properties that we find in all human languages. Okay, that we find in all human languages. Okay, for example, all languages try to obligatorily have a subject. All languages have nouns. All languages have verbs. So these are universal principles, and that are found in all human languages. This is the reason why we are able to learn foreign languages. Languages if languages were distinct or different completely, then we are not going to learn foreign languages. Okay, which means that you shouldn't be surprised, for example, when you hear that a polyglot, somebody who speaks many languages, a polyglot, I mean, speaks 10 or 15 languages. That's not surprising. Why? Because as Chomsky says, there are certain universal principles, okay, universal rules. Once you learn three or four languages, then the fifth, the sixth, the seventh language, etc., will be very easy. Why? Learn. Why? Because languages are similar in terms of certain properties, as I said, in terms of nouns, verbs, adjectives, in terms of subject, etc. I'm giving you just examples from syntax. Of course, there are examples from phonology. Okay, in phonology, for example, almost all languages say that you must have a syllable that begins with an onset. Okay, this is something universal. And the universal syllable structure is CV. Okay, CV is the universal syllable structure because of a number of reasons that we shouldn't talk about here. So principles, parameters are those language specific rules. Okay, language specific rules. For example, of course, nouns, adjectives, verbs exist in all languages, right? Fine. But the parameters, the position, for example, of the subject, the position of the verb, differs from one language to another. Okay? It differs from one language to another. For example, in some languages, the subject must come after the verb. In some languages, the verb must come, okay, after the subject. Okay, so languages differ in terms of the position of the subjects and the position of the verb. Languages also differ in terms of the position of the head of a phrase. Some languages are right-headed, which means the head is always on the right. Some languages are left-headed, which means that the head is always on the left. Is this clear? Is there a question? Okay, now we move on to three main concepts. Okay, three main concepts: observationally adequate grammar, descriptively adequate grammar, and explanatory adequate grammar. So, observationally adequate grammar means a grammar that accounts for observed real world data, such as corpus. So, what does it mean to say that a grammar is observationally adequate? It means that it is capable of accounting for accounting for the correctness of a certain sentence. It is able to generate only correct sentences. This is a grammar that is observationally adequate. Okay, so any grammar that is observationally adequate is capable of generating only correct sentences. A grammar of a language is observationally adequate if it generates only correct sentences, okay, such as the first sentence. So look at these two sentences. Oh, Mary says John wants to shave himself. And B, Mary says John wants to shave herself. The problem is in herself. So a grammar that is observationally adequate is not able to generate sentence B because it is not correct, okay, in terms of the meaning of herself. So a grammar that is observationally adequate considers the correctness of the sentence. As John wants to shave himself. So this sentence is correct in terms of word order, okay, in terms of word selection. Mary, the subject, says, etc., the verb, the VP, etc. So grammar which is observationally adequate generates only correct sentences, sentences that respect the linear order of words, okay? The linear structure must be correct, which means that a grammar which is observationally adequate is a simple grammar, okay? Is a simple grammar because it considers only the correctness of the sentence. It does not go beyond the sentence. For example, it does not consider the intuition of native speakers, as we'll see. Okay? Is it clear? Observationally adequate grammar is very simple because it's the first step towards explanatory adequate grammar. So observationally adequate grammar considers only the linear structure. Okay, the internal arrangement of words should be correctly structured. Okay, and there should be no error, no mistake in terms of the meaning. There should be no error in terms of the combination of words together. That's all about observationally adequate grammar. However, descriptively adequate grammar is a little, okay, advanced. It's more advanced than observationally adequate grammar because it accounts for observed real world data. So here it includes the main concern of observationally adequate grammar. In addition to this, it accounts for native speakers' judgments. Okay, so this is what is additional. Okay, so it accounts for the correctness, the linear structure of the sentence and the native speaker's judgment. Okay, what whether native speakers accept accept these sentences or not, whether native speakers consider a sentence ambiguous or not, whether it is a normal, a frequently used word or not, etc. So it is an appropriate representation of the linguistic knowledge or intuition of speakers. So descriptively adequate grammar also considers the intuition of speakers. Okay. For example, as non-native speakers, when we hear a certain structure, certain sentence which seems to be weird. So the only thing that we do is to rely on the previous linguistic knowledge that we have in mind because of the process of learning, because of the language rules that you have learned. Okay. So you rely on what you already know. You rely on the rules to judge the grammaticalities. However, native speakers do not primarily rely on the rules, but they rely on their intuition to judge the grammaticality of a certain sentence. Okay? For example, let's take an example from phonology. if you say smrik, for example, smr, then smrik is not does not exist in English. Right? Smrik does not exist in English. So if you say it to native speakers, they will automatically say, "Oh my God, this word does not exist. What are you talking about?" So this means that they use their intuition. It seems a weird word, but for us non-native speakers, you will say, "Oh, this word does not exist in English." Why? Because there is a rule in English which says that if there are three consonants in the initial position of a word, the first one must be S, second one must be voiceless stop, P or T or K, okay, and the third one must be a sonorant sound minus nasal, okay, which means it should be either a liquid or a semivowel. Take any word begins with three consonants. For example, strong, spring, strike, street, etc. So take all the words that begin with three consonants. The first one must be S. The second one must be P or T or K, which means stop, voiceless start. And the third one must be W or Y or R or L. For example, splash, sprite, etc. So the third one must be a sonorant. Okay, so we as non-native speakers rely on the rules that we know to judge whether smrik is a possible word or not. But native speakers, many of them, are not aware of this rule of a three consonants initial position, but they rely on their intuition. Okay, so a descriptively adequate grammar is able to account for this intuition that we are talking about, the intuition of speakers to judge the grammaticality of a certain sentence. Okay, and descriptive adequacy includes observational adequacy. Why? Because as a first step, descriptively adequate grammar tries to generate only correct sentences, and the second step accounts for native speakers' judgment. Okay, now it is an example of ambiguity. Fido is ready to eat has two meanings. Fido can be a person or can be a product. Okay, so Fido is ready to eat his lunch. Here we're talking about a person, or Fido is ready to be eaten if Fido is a product. So this is ambiguous. Okay, ambiguous. So observationally adequate grammar will not account for ambiguity. It will account only for the correctness of the sentence. The sentence is correct, fine, it will be generated. But descriptively adequate grammar will generate both of them. The sentence B and sentence C. Okay, both of them are correct and will also account for the ambiguity. Okay, the ambiguity. But observationally adequate grammar will not account for ambiguity because this ambiguity depends on the intuition of the speaker. Okay, because ambiguity is something that we can derive from the sentence, but it is not realized in the sentence. The two readings are not realized in the sentence, but we derive them. Okay, so what does an English speaker know about this sentence? So he knows how to construct the sentence. This is simply observational adequacy. Okay, so a grammar that is concerned only with how a speaker constructs the sentence, and he should construct the sentence correctly, then we are talking about observational adequacy. Okay, and if the grammar is concerned with whether the speaker knows the sentence is ambiguous, then we're talking about descriptive adequacy. Okay? So,
Grammar that accounts for A, this A, okay, is observationally adequate. And a grammar that accounts for B is observationally and descriptively adequate. Remember, please, we cannot move to descriptive or descriptively adequate grammar if we don't satisfy observational adequacy. Okay? It's impossible to talk about descriptive adequacy if if you're not satisfy or reach observational adequacy. Okay, which means that observational adequacy is automatically included within descriptively adequate grammar. This is the reason why a grammar that accounts for B is both observationally and descriptively adequate. Okay? Now, descriptive adequacy is able to describe the linguistic intuition, as we said, the implied competence of native speakers, is able to describe the intuition of native speakers. Okay? Now, here is an example of a theory that is descriptively adequate. Now, we have to give an example. Ixbar theory that we are going to talk about in chapter 6. Ixbar theory has quite successfully achieved this level as it is able to explain how the tacit linguistic knowledge is used by speakers, and it can clarify structural ambiguity with different surface structure representations. Okay, so expert theory is both observationally adequate and descriptively adequate because it accounts for two things: for the native speaker's intuition, because it accounts for the structural ambiguity, and also it considers the tacit, the abstract linguistic knowledge. Why? We take the example of WH questions. WH questions, what did you do yesterday? So expert theory does not generate the surface structure. It starts with the deep structure, okay? Which means what did you do yesterday in the underlying representation is not like this. It is like you did yesterday what? So this is the way how expert theory generates a certain sentence or a certain questions. It starts with the deep structure, okay, as far as WH questions are concerned, okay? Okay, so it accounts for the abstract linguistic knowledge and ambiguity, which means that expert theory is a good example to talk about a grammar, a theory that is both observationally and descriptively adequate. Is there any question before we move on to observation? The last point, explanatory adequate grammar.
It's clear, Professor.
It's clear, guys.
Okay. So the last category or type is explanatory adequate grammar. So this explanatory adequate grammar includes all of them. Includes observational adequate grammar, descriptive adequate grammar. Okay, so it's a grammar that accounts for observed real-world data. This is what we talked about in observational adequate grammar, and native speakers intuitions and judgments. This is what we talked about in descriptive adequate grammar, and this is what is new and offers an explanation for the facts of language acquisition. So explanatory adequate grammar tries to go further, tries to go to the primary source of language, which is language acquisition. Okay, language acquisition. So according to Matthew, the theory, the explanatory adequate grammar or explanatory adequate theory, the theory should touch the depth of explaining how the speaker can obtain the knowledge about the language. So which means that in explanatory adequate grammar, okay,
the linguist is not simply responsible for accounting for the correctness of the data or the native speaker's judgments, but also tries to link this to language acquisition. Okay, how the speaker can obtain the knowledge about the language. Okay, which means if you analyze a certain data, you ask the question, okay, how did, for example, or how do children acquire this form? So compared to descriptive adequacy, explanatory adequacy returns to the primary linguistic data, PLD. Okay, so the data children are exposed to and use in attaining the native grammars, and tries to explain how children can relate PLD, primary linguistic data, with, with their linguistic competence and establish their linguistic system in one language rather than other languages. Okay, so explanatory adequate grammar tries to focus on language acquisition, how children are exposed to and use the native grammars. So they do not simply explain grammar in terms of what they see, what they observe in the data or the native speaker's judgment, but they try to see how children attain, how children reach this grammar. They try to explain this. How come that children produce this grammar, this structure? Okay, and how children link between LAD, language acquisition device, or the exposure, the output that they get from the environment, and the linguistic competence, what they have already acquired to come up with a language system. Okay, so this is the primary concern of this grammar. It tries to see how children reach the grammar and how they use the exposure, the output that they get from their parents, from the environment. Okay, and they link to their competence, what they have already acquired, and they try to see what is the link between the linguistic competence that children have in mind, okay, and the exposure, the output, and the language they come up with. For example, when children say, I think you are familiar with the concept of idiomorphs. Maybe you did it in applied linguistics. Idiomorphs refers to the words, to the weird words that children come up with, to the words that do not exist in the language that children are exposed to. Because as Chomsky says, children do not simply produce words or language that exist in the environment. Okay, because of creativity, children come up with words that do not exist in the environment. Okay, so because of their creativity, so if we want to analyze these words, okay, then we have to consider the outputs in the exposure, and we will realize that these forms do not exist in the output, and we go back to the linguistic competence, okay, and we see, well, the linguistic competence, so children have not been exposed to this form. So how come? So we conclude that they use their creativity to come up with this language, to come up with this grammar. Okay. So explanatory adequacy rests on the theory of universal grammar, and in particular the general principles and open parameters. So explanatory adequacy considers the principles, okay, the universal features that languages share, and the parameters, okay, that characterize the initial state of the language faculty. So explanatory adequacy tries to come up with the properties that are universal. For example, nouns in syntax. In syntax, expert theory, for example, generates a tree structure, okay, that applies to all sentences in all human languages. Okay, and also it accounts for the parameters.
the variations among languages. Okay, we'll see an example. Okay, so again, expert theory relatively indicates explanatory adequacy to a certain extent. Now, we are using expert theory as an example to explain that this is a theory that is also explanatory adequate. So if you have it in the exam, so you may use expert theory as an example while defining the terms or any other theory. Now, how can we explain that expert theory is an explanatory adequate grammar? So first, it must account for the correctness of the sentence. It must include observational adequacy. It must account for the native speaker's intuition, and also it must consider language acquisition. Now, if in that it does account for all these points. So first, it is able to provide a universal structure which will apply to various language structures. So expert theory, as we will see in the tree structure, so you can generate any sentence. So it's a universal structure. So it accounts for the principles, okay, the universal features. Okay, so expert theory, thanks to the tree structure, that we are able to generate any sentence in any language. Okay, and at the same time, it applies to the parameters, the different languages. For example, if we consider the word order, some languages begin with the subject, have a sentence that begins with the subject. Other languages have sentences such as Moroccan Arabic, okay, that begin with the verb. So expert theory is also able to account for these variations. We will see this in chapter maybe 10 or 8 while talking about WH movement, DP movement, and head-to-head movement, because we will see, for example, the NP from one position to another, or the VP from one position to another, depending on the order in a certain language. Okay? Is there any question? Okay? Ayub Laluli, if you share your slides again, I will block you and you will never join the meeting. Okay, yes, please. Is there any question? Yes, please. Is there any question? Is it clear?
It's clear, sir.
Yes, Professor, it's clear.
Okay. Now we move to chapter 3. Okay. Constituency, trees, and rules. Now, let me ask you this question. How do native speakers group words together? Raise your hands, please. Omar?
Sir, their previous
Yes, Mr.
competence
Omar.
that work, their previous competence that make them able to collect words together.
Okay, yes. Somebody else? Please do not type. If you want to say anything, then unmute your mic and say it. Okay, so speakers may rely on their intuition, as you said. Okay, this is specifically for native speakers. They may rely on the language they know, the language rules they already know. For example, we already know that a verb can never occur with an article, etc. Now, how would you explain that the first phrases are correct and the second line of the phrases is incorrect? Yes, please. Why we can't say a speak or frequently man? Why? Yes, Mr. Omar.
The syntactic order is not appropriate, sir.
Uh-huh. Okay, somebody else. Fatiha?
Professor, because we already know that an article does not go with a verb, but rather with a noun.
Okay, Mohammed. Okay, same answer. Okay, yes.
Yes, the same answer because an article
So yeah.
can become before a verb. It
Okay.
must be before a
So
noun.
okay, so let's use the term determiner instead of articles. Okay, articles are called determiners, and determiners include articles, quantifiers, okay, etc. For example, some, many,
Okay, Prophet.
little, few, etc. are all called determiners. So we are going to use the term determiner. Okay. So the sentence, the phrases "I speak" and "frequently man" are incorrect because determiners can never go with verbs, and adverbs can never go with nouns. That's why frequently man is incorrect. So this means that we cannot group words together arbitrarily. We have to respect some rules. Okay, for example, determiners cannot co-occur with verbs. Okay, which means some words select other words and do not select specific words. Okay, and this is what Chomsky calls the selection restriction. Okay, Chomsky says that this is selection restriction, which means that some words select other words. For example, adjectives select nouns. Okay, adjectives modify nouns. So adjectives do not go with verbs. Adjectives do not select verbs. Okay, this is the meaning of selection restriction.
So words again form a constituent. So look at the word. This is another explanation. We can say that at home is correct and a speak is incorrect because at home forms a constituent and a speak does not form a constituent. Now, what is a constituent? Yes, please. Fatiha? Yes, please.
A constituent is a group of words that function together as a unit or as a phrase.
Okay. So a constituent means, okay, or refers to words that go together. A constituent means a group of words that functions as a unit. They go together. Okay? So within a certain phrase, we may have larger constituents and smaller constituents. For example, the lady from Morocco. The lady from Morocco. This is a noun phrase. It's the largest constituent. But within this constituent, we have a smaller constituent, which is the preposition phrase from Morocco. So this constituent is included within the largest constituent, which is the lady from Morocco. Okay. So in syntax, this is a very interesting point. Hierarchical structure. Okay, which means that certain constituents are embedded within other constituents. So a constituent means a group of words, okay, that functions together as a unit. So there are two different ways to represent constituents in square brackets or tree structure. Okay, so this is a tree structure and this is square bracket. Okay, so remember, please, there is a golden rule. Constituents must be grouped together. Constituents must be branched from the same node, must be grouped together. Okay? Please remember this rule. Constituents must be grouped together, must be branched together as here, okay, the student. So constituents are embedded one inside another to form larger and larger constituents. And this is called hierarchical structure. Here is an example. The student loved his syntax assignments. So the largest constituent is the sentence. The student loved his syntax assignments. Within its largest constituent, we have smaller constituents. We have the noun phrase, then we have the verb phrase. Within the verb phrase, we have the noun phrase, his syntax assignment. Within the noun phrase, we have the adjective phrase, syntax. Okay? So look at this example. TP is the sentence. TP is the sentence. TP is the largest constituent. It includes two main constituents, the NP, the noun phrase, and the VP, the verb phrase. And within the verb phrase, we still have other constituents, the noun phrase, and within the noun phrase, we have another constituent, which is the adjective phrase. And this is called hierarchical structure. This is called hierarchical structure. So hierarchical constituent structure can also be represented with brackets. Okay, as we will see. So is there any question about this tree?
Yes, sir, please. What does TP means exactly?
Is there any question about the tree? Sorry, what? TP is the sentence, tense phrase. Tense phrase, TP. T means tense phrase, which means that the sentence is conjugated, that we have a sentence. So you can replace TP with S, sentence S. The same meaning.
Okay, we use TP because we will use it in the coming chapters. It's better than using S, but they have the same meaning. You can use sentence. Any question? Okay, we move on to bracketed diagram. Example of a bracketed diagram. Oh, the student loves his syntax assignments. So the largest constituent is the sentence, TP. Okay, the largest constituent is TP. Okay, we use brackets here. And within the TP, we have smaller constituents. We have the noun phrase, the student, the noun phrase, and we have the verb phrase, VP. We use brackets again here, VP. Brackets for the NP and brackets for the VP. We still have further phrases or constituents. Within the VP, we have the noun phrase NP. His syntax assignments. Again, we use brackets. We use brackets for the NP. Within the NP, we still have the adjective phrase. Okay, the adjective phrase syntax. Now we have finished the phrases. We have finished the phrases. So first, we started with the sentence, the TP as the largest constituent. Then we moved to the phrases, the NP phrase, noun phrase, the VP, then the NP within the VP, then the adjective phrase within the noun phrase. Now we have no more phrases. We have no more phrases, so we move to the parts of speech. We move to the words, determiner, noun, verb, determiner, adjective, noun. This is the last step. Okay, so the determiner, brackets between brackets, noun between brackets, verb between brackets, determiner between brackets, adjective between brackets, and noun between brackets. So this is a very easy way. First, you start with the largest constituent, which is the sentence. Then you move to the phrases. You finish the phrases. Then you move to the parts of speech, the words. But if you are able to do it as the last one from the very beginning, then wait, which means that these steps are just to help you understand how you can do bracketed diagrams. But if you can do it just in one branching, then it's enough. Okay? So this is the result. So if I give you brackets in the exam, so you are not. This is something you need to do in the drafts. You branch the sentence, then the phrases, then the parts of speech. But what I want only this one. Okay, only the last branching. TP, NP, determiner, noun, VP, verb, NP. But to do it easily, follow these steps. Do it in a draft. Okay? So on your draft, do these steps, follow these steps. But on the exam sheet, you have to write only the last one. Is there any question about the bracketed diagram?
It's clear, Professor.
Is it clear? Please confirm.
Yes, Professor.
Okay.
Professor,
Now we'll move to the noun phrase. Yes? Question?
in noun phrase, in his, what does mean D? The D, small d?
Determiner.
Determiner.
This
Okay.
is determiner.
Okay.
Determiner. Okay. Yes. Remember, please, all possessive pronouns, his, her, their, etc., are determiners. So determiners are articles, possessive pronouns, quantifiers, some, many, few, little, any, etc. All of them are determiners. So in syntax, we are going to call them determiners. Noun phrase. What does a noun phrase consist of? First, the rules we are going to consider in this chapter are called phrase structure rules, PS rules, phrase structure rules, because they generate the phrase structure tree of a sentence. So what are the components of a noun phrase? What do we find in a noun phrase? What are the modifiers of a noun? Yes, please. Okay, Miss Fatima.
In a noun phrase, we have the noun as the head of the phrase, and then we have adjectives and prepositional phrases as modifiers, in addition to determiners.
Yes. So we are going to use these variables x, y, and z as variables to stand for any category. Okay? Look at this diagram. So here, xp, p means phrase. P means phrase. And x, we can replace it with noun and we get noun phrase. We can replace it with adjective and we get adjective phrase. We can replace it with v and we get VP verb phrase. Okay? We can replace it with p and we get p preposition phrase. Okay? So x is variable. It can be replaced with any part of speech. Tomorrow means consists of, and x, y, z. These are words, noun, adjective, verb, preposition, etc. So this is phrase, and these are the words. Okay, noun, adjective, preposition, etc. So the components of a noun phrase, we may have only a noun, and it's a noun phrase. Okay, so the in P consists of a noun. Note that we have replaced with in P. This is what we are going to do. We are going to replace this x with noun, and we talk about noun phrase, and we are going to replace x with adjective, and we talk about adjective phrase, etc. So in P consists of a noun, may contain only a noun. Okay? For example, the word woman, woman alone is a noun phrase. The pronoun he alone is a noun phrase. Some people might say, well, it's only one word and it's a phrase. Yes, it is a phrase. Why? Because anything that can replace a phrase is a phrase. For example, I met a crazy man yesterday. So a crazy man can be replaced by him. I met him yesterday, or I met John yesterday. So since you can replace a phrase with one word, this means that that word is also a phrase. Okay. Number two, a noun may be modified by a determiner. Okay, a determiner. For example, so the box is an example. In P consists of determiner and noun. So remember, please, that in a noun phrase, the noun is the head, and it is the only obligatory element. So determiner is between parentheses because it's optional. Because it is optional. Because it is optional. Why? Because as we said earlier, in a noun phrase, you may find only the noun, only box alone. So the noun phrase may consist of the noun alone. Okay? 1 minute, please. Sorry. So the NP may contain the noun and determiner is optional. Okay. Noun may be modified by an adjective phrase. Okay, as your classmate said, the NP. So remember that always the noun which is obligatory, and it can be pre-modified by the adjective phrase or the determiner. But notice that both of them are optional. Okay, both of them are optional because they are between parentheses. They are optional. Anything, remember, in linguistics, anything which is between parentheses is optional. Okay, here is an example. Okay, the NP, we have determiner, we have the adjective phrase and the noun. Notice that the adjective phrase here we have triangle. Triangle means, okay, we are not concerned with the details. We are not concerned with details because normally we should branch adjective phrase, then adjective, then big. Okay, so we are not concerned with the details here, but please don't do it in the exam. Okay, so the NP contains determiner de and the adjective phrase and the noun. Okay, please remember the meaning of the triangle. We're not concerned with the details. Okay, but don't do it in the exam, please. Number 4, a noun may be modified by a prepositional phrase. Okay, prepositional phrase. So this is an example. Okay, so the NP and preposition phrase always comes after the noun. Always comes after the noun. Okay, so again, the preposition phrase is optional. Adjective phrase is optional. Determiner is optional. The only element which is obligatory is the noun. Okay? So here is an example, the NP, the big box of crayons. Okay? So you can have more than one adjective and more than one preposition phrase. Okay? For example, the big yellow box of cookies with the pink lid. So we have 2 adjective phrases before the noun and 2 prepositional phrases after the noun. Okay, so we have to modify this in the rule. Okay, we have to modify it in the rule. We have to write this one. Okay, adjective phrase plus, because you can have more than one adjective, 2, 4, 3, etc. And the preposition plus, because you can have more than one preposition, as the previous example. Okay? Determiner, we cannot use plus here. We cannot use plus with determiner because you can never have 2 determiners. We cannot say, for example, the many people. We simply say many people or the people. We cannot say the many people. We cannot say the his. The his. We cannot say the an apple. The an apple. Okay? This is the reason why we cannot use plus with determiner. Because you always find only one before a noun. Is it clear? Is there any question? No, Professor, clear.
It's clear, Professor.
Clear.
Okay. So This is the rule of the noun phrase. It's impossible to find a noun phrase without these rules. So you may find in a noun phrase only the noun, or the noun preceded by a determiner, or the noun preceded by adjective phrase, or the noun followed by preposition phrase, or you may find the adjective and the preposition phrase and the noun, or you may find all of them. So what is important is that the noun is always there, but the others are optional. Okay? Now, I'm going to say something very, very interesting. Okay? So, a lexical category, when I say lexical category, which means X, okay? Lexical category, which is X, I mean noun, adjective, verb, preposition, etc., etc., okay? And when I say phrasal category, I refer to phrases, noun phrase, verb phrase, adjective phrase, adverb phrase, okay, preposition phrase, etc. Is it clear the difference between lexical categories and phrasal categories? Lexical categories are parts of speech: noun, adjective, verb, preposition, determiner, etc. And in the phrasal category, we have the noun phrase, verb phrase, adjective. We have the phrases. Okay, is this clear?
Yes.
So now listen carefully, please. Listen carefully. So the phrase, it could be the noun phrase, it could be the adjective phrase. I'm talking about all the phrases. The noun phrase must consist of only one lexical category, which is the head. Only one lexical category. In this case, it is noun. And optional phrasal categories. Okay? I repeat, the phrase must consist only one lexical category, which is the noun here. If we have adjective phrase, then adjective here. If we have adverb phrase, then adverb here. If we have verb phrase, then verb here, etc. So there are two main points that you must remember. First, in a phrase, forget about determiner. In a phrase, the head alone, which should be lexical, should be noun, adjective, verb, preposition. All other modifiers are phrasal, which means they must be phrase. Preposition phrase, not preposition. Adjective phrase, not adjective. Adverb phrase, not adverb. Okay? They are optional. They are between parentheses. They are optional. I repeat, please remember these 2 points. In a phrase, only the head, which is lexical, which must be noun, adjective, etc. All other modifiers are first optional between parentheses and must be phrasal. Must be phrasal. Okay, is it clear? Any question?
Can you repeat, sir?
So who can repeat this? Who can repeat this, please? Yes, who can repeat this, please? Raise your hands. Okay, I'm going to repeat. Latifa, yes?
As you said, Professor, you said in a phrase in general, whether it is a noun phrase, adjective phrase, adverb phrase, or prepositional phrase, consists of one lexical category, which is the head. and an optional phrasal category.
Yes. So I repeat. So in any phrase, only the head, which should be a lexical category. If we're talking about noun phrase, lexical category is noun. If we're talking about adjective phrase, the lexical category is adjective. And all other modifiers that come before or after the head must be first optional between parentheses and must be phrasal, which means do not write just preposition, write preposition phrase. Do not write only adjective, write adjective phrase. Do not write only the adverb, but write adverb phrase, etc. So we'll see further examples. So please remember this rule of the NP. Now, adjective phrase, the components of an adjective phrase. The adjective phrase, we may have only the adjective or the adjective pre-modified by an adverb phrase. So please remember, if we have an adverb and an adjective, it is an adjective phrase, not an adverb phrase. This is a common mistake. When you have an adverb plus an adjective, it's an adjective phrase. Okay, so the adjective phrase is always pre-modified by an adverb. Okay. Now consider the following two NPs. Can anyone explain the difference between big yellow and very yellow in terms of modification? The big yellow book and the very yellow book. What is the difference? Umayma?
Professor?
Yes, Miss Umayma. Umayma?
Yes, sir. In the first sentence, we have two
It's not a
adjective.
sentence. It's a phrase. It's noun phrase.
In the first, we have two adjective phrase modify the noun book. And in the second, we have very an adverb who modify the adjective yellow, and yellow an adjective who modify the noun book.
So you made a mistake in the last sentence. You said, and yellow modifies book in B. No, it is very yellow that modifies book. So I'm going to repeat and please pay attention. So first, in A, we have two adjective phrases. Yellow modifies book and big modifies book, which means that the two adjectives, big and yellow, are not related to each other, they don't modify each other. So big modifies book and yellow modifies book. While in B, we have an adverb. Remember, an adverb modifies the adjective. It has nothing to do with the noun. So very modifies yellow. But the mistake you made, Miss Umayma, is that not only yellow that modifies book, it is very yellow, it is the adjective phrase. So very modifies yellow, and very yellow, the whole, the adjective phrase modifies book. Look at the tree. So here, this is A. We have the noun phrase. We have the first adjective phrase, big, and we have the second adjective phrase, yellow. So yellow modifies book, and adjective phrase modifies book. So they have nothing in common. Okay, they have nothing in common. They are not related to each other. But in B, very modifies only yellow. It has nothing to do with book. Okay, very modifies only yellow. And the adjective phrase very yellow modifies book, not yellow alone.
It's the adjective phrase, very yellow, that modifies book. So please remember, whenever there is an adverb phrase, it must modify the adjective. Whenever there is an adverb phrase and an adjective, and the adverb phrase must modify only the adjective. It has nothing to do with the noun. Okay, so we can represent this by this tree. So this means that only the constituents must be branched together. Constituents must be branched together. So very forms a constituent with yellow, not with book. So they must be branched together. And here, yellow does not form a constituent with big. So it does not form a constituent with big. So they mustn't be branched together. So yellow modifies book and big modifies book. Okay, so this means that constituents principle are based on modification. Principle of modification. Modifiers are always attached within the phrase they modify, which means that very modifies yellow. So they must be attached together. Look at the cursor. They must be attached together. Here. I'm moving the cursor to understand. Okay, so they must be branched together because very modifies yellow. So according to this rule, principle of modification, if a word modifies another word, then the words must be branched together. Is it clear? Any questions?
Sir,
Yes,
excuse me.
Mehdi?
I have a little question out of the context. Actually, on the structure you are showing us, we call the adverb adverbial phrase and the adjective phrase. But why there is only um, representing book, which is noun instead of NP? I don't know if you get my question.
Yes, I got your point.
Okay.
Remember what we said earlier. Mr. Mehdi, look at this structure. In a noun phrase, you must have noun, not empty here. Remember what we said. In a noun a phrase, the head should be lexical, not phrasal. The head should be lexical, not phrasal. And all other modifiers except determinant must be phrasal. Now let's see this again here. So here in the MP, the head is lexical noun. All other modifiers must be phrasal. Adjective phrase. Forget about determinant, we'll see this later on. In here, this is phrase, this is the head, it should be lexical. Look at the adjective phrase, same thing, adjective phrase. This is the head, it should be lexical. This is only a modifier, it should be with a phrase. Is it clear, Mary, or shall I repeat?
No, it's clear. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we move on. Now, avoid two lexical categories as sisters. This is a common mistake. What did we say about the phrase? The phrase must contain only one lexical category, which is the noun here, because we're talking about the noun phrase. So we shouldn't have an adjective here. We should have adjective phrase. Here, we shouldn't have adjective. We should have phrase, because remember what I said. In a phrase, only the head should be lexical. Only the head should be lexical. All other modifiers should be phrasal. So here we have to add be, adjective phrase, and here we should add be, adjective phrase. Okay? The same thing here. Adjective phrase, avoid two lexical categories. avoid two lexical categories. Adjective, adverb, these are two lexical categories. We must add the phrase. One of them should take be the phrase, and it is the adverb because it is the adverb that modifies the adjective. So we have to add a P here, adverb, phrase. So please avoid two lexical categories together as sisters at the same level. These are sisters because they're at the same level, but the N here and adjective here are not sisters. I'm talking about the same level. The same level here. They shouldn't have more than one lexical category. Is it clear in question? At this point, avoid two lexical categories. You can ask any question, okay, related to what we are talking about. Is it clear? Yeah,
Yes,
is it clear?
it's clear.
So,
Yes, please.
Sir,
Yes, Mohammed. Mohammed, yes.
what is the lexical category in the adjective phrase? Is it the whole sentence?
No, I think you don't understand any lexical category. What are the lexical categories in this tree?
The head of
Okay,
the
this
sentence.
is lexical category adverb. Lexical category, the head of the phrase. Okay, this is lexical category. This is lexical category. Mr. Muhammad, as simple as this, the lexical category is noun or adjective or verb or preposition or determiner. The phrasal category is the phrase, adverb phrase, noun phrase, adjective phrase, preposition phrase, etc. So here, this is lexical, noun. This is phrasal because we have phrase P here. This is phrase. This is lexical. This is lexical. So this phrase has a lexical category, this one. And this phrase has a lexical category, this one. And this phrase has a lexical category, this one. Okay? So again, in P has a lexical category in one. Adjective phrase has a lexical category. Adverb phrase has a lexical category, verb. Okay? Any question?
Thank you, sir.
Well, welcome. Okay, we move on now to the adverb phrase. Now, what are the components of an adverb phrase? What are the modifiers of an adverb phrase? Ahmed Nabil?
Sir, adverb modify the verb.
No, I'm not talking about the modification, the function of the adverb. I'm talking about the adverb phrase where the adverb is head and what modifies the adverb. The adverb is the head. Examples of adverb phrases: beautifully, very beautifully, etc. So if you take any adverb phrase, you will find that the adverb phrase may consist of the adverb alone or the adverb pre-modified by another adverb phrase. Okay? So this is okay, the structure of any adverb phrase. So you may find only the adverb or adverb pre-modified by another adverb phrase. Okay? So this is an example very quickly. So this is an adverb phrase. The head is the second one. Remember, the adverb phrase, the head is always the second one. So quickly is the head. And very pre-modifies quickly. Okay? Very pre-modifies quickly. Okay? Okay? And notice here that it is adverb phrase, not adverb. So you can never find an adverb phrase where you have an adjective, etc. Okay? So the adverb phrase, in the adverb phrase, you may have only adverb or the adverb pre-modified another adverb phrase. So please avoid these common mistakes. XP, XX. So XP is the phrase. Avoid two lexical categories. Avoid XX means avoid, for example, if we have noun phrase here, avoid adjective noun. If we have adjective phrase, avoid adverb adjective. If we have adverb phrase, avoid adverb adverb. So avoid having two lexical categories. This is an example. Adverb phrase, avoid having adverb adverb. One of them must be phrasal. In this case, it is the first one. You must add be here, adverb phrase. So avoid two lexical categories. Okay? The second mistake, avoid having XP, 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 which means avoid, and for example, NP, 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 or avoid having adjective phrase, adverb phrase, adjective phrase. Here is an example. Avoid adverb phrase, adverb phrase, adverb phrase, or adjective phrase, adverb phrase, adjective phrase. Can anyone tell me why? Why? So here, because, example, this one, this phrase has two heads because any lexical category has the chance to be the head of this phrase. And here in the second example, this adverb phrase has its own head, which is below it. Whenever you have a phrase, you must find its head. And this adverb phrase has its own head below it. Now, this phrase will be left with no head. Okay? We'll see an example. So the previous trees are ill-formed because either a phrase does not have a head or has two heads. A phrase without a head. So here, as I said earlier, this adverb phrase has its head below it. It should be here. And this phrase has its own head below it. And this phrase is left with no head. We'll see an example. And the phrase with two heads. Okay? So this is lexical. This is lexical. So the two heads, they can be considered both as heads because any lexical category has the chance to head the phrase. Okay? So here's verb phrase, verb, adverb. Which one is the head? We don't know. But if we add here, we know the head is this one. Clear?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
Prof.
sir. Yes, this is clear. Yes, sir.
It's clear.
Okay. Now, this is a correct branching. So this is the phrase. Very quickly is an adjective phrase because the verb modifies the adjective. So this adjective is the head of this phrase. And this adverb is the head of this phrase. So if we add adjective phrase here, then yellow will be the head of this one. Yellow will be the head of this one. And then the problem which is the head of this one. Okay? This is the reason why you can have XP, XP, XP. You should have XP, XP, X here, lexical category. Okay? And here in B, adverb phrase, adverb. So, very is the head of this phrase. Quickly is the head of this phrase. Again, if we add P here, then quickly will be the head of this one. And then this mother, the mother adverb phrase, will be left with no head. So very is embedded in the adjective phrase because it modifies it. Now, principle of modification. If an XP, let's explain it here. If an XP, this is the XP, the adverb phrase. Okay? If an XP, this one, the adverb phrase, modifies some head. This is the head, Y. If an XP modifies the head, Y, okay, then XP must assist Y. They are sisters, yes, sisters to each other. And daughter of the adjective phrase. Okay? So this, in a very simple way, the modifier should be sister to the head. Okay? XP is sister to Y. And daughter of YP. Okay? So if a phrase modifies head, it should be sister to it. And daughter of the same mother. The adjective phrase. Any question?
Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't get this last.
Me too, Professor, please.
Okay. So this adverb phrase modifies the adjective. So remember, these are just variables. Okay, we can change them. So XP, suppose that XP refers to the modifier of the head. And YP is the mother. Why the mother? Because these are daughters. Verb phrase and adjective are daughters of the adjective phrase. So the modifier XP should be sister to the head adjective. They are sisters, yes. Here they are sisters. Okay, and they should have the same mother. The mother is YP. Okay, very simple. The adverb phrase, which is XP, sister to the head. They are sister because they are the civil. Okay, so they are sisters, and they have the same mother, which is the adjective phrase, which is YP. Okay, so if XP is Y, they should be sisters, and they should have the same mother. As simple as this. Okay. So this is not very important, okay, to what we're going to do in the following chapters. Now,
Thank you, sir.
this is what is.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
sir.
welcome. Yes.
The confusing thing is why do we call it XP rather than just only than P? Because the mother, as you told us, is called YP. Where does the X comes from? I mean,
Mr. Mehdi, you are still making the same mistake. I told you that in any phrase, you must have here one should be XP and one should be Y or X. We can change them. We can write here XP and here YP and here X. But the point is this: it's always the case that here the mother should be phrased and the daughters, one of them must be phrase, which means XP, and one of them should be lexical. This is always the case. You cannot have, so P means phrase here and P means phrase here. Y is arbitrary. We can write M, we can write N, whatever. It's arbitrary. Okay? But Y here and Y here must be similar. If you write M here, then there should be M here. Why? Because this is the head of this phrase. So they must have the same letter, the same variable. If you write N here, there should be N here. And this X should be different. You can write any letter here, okay? And why is it XP? Because there must be a phrase, one of them. Either this one or this one must be a phrase. Is it clear or not?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so we move on. Asymmetric relationship. So the verb phrase modifies the adjective, but adjective does not modify adverb phrase. So it's very easy because the head is modified by the adverb phrase, not the opposite. So the head cannot modify the modifier. It is the modifier that modifies the head. So if they both modify each other, then it is symmetric relationship. Symmetric relationship. If they modify each other. But this is asymmetric because only one modifies the other. The adverb phrase modifies the adjective and not the opposite. Okay, this is the meaning of asymmetric relation, which means we go one way from the adverb phrase, which modifies the adjective, but not the other way. The adjective does not again modify the adverb phrase. Now the prepositional phrase. Preposition is always followed by a noun phrase. Take any example. For example, between the houses, at home, in the university, about 5 o'clock. Take any preposition phrase, and the preposition phrase always starts with a preposition. So take any preposition phrase, so you will find the noun phrase after it. That's why this is the rule of the preposition phrase. Okay? So the preposition phrase may consist of only the preposition or the preposition followed by an optional noun phrase. An optional noun phrase. Here is an example with an X. So again, this is the phrase XP. It consists of the head preposition, and this one should be phrasal, the noun phrase. Okay? So please make a difference between two types of prepositions. Preposition phrases that can be arguments, as in transitive verbs. For example, I put them on the table. And preposition phrases that can be simple modifiers, such as I met him at school. Now let me explain. So in the sentence, I met him at school, you can simply say, I met him. We don't need, it's not necessary to say at school. Okay, so it's optional. It's only an adjunct. Okay, so it is only a modifier. I met him at school. You can simply say, I met him without saying at school. So at school is optional. Its function is a modifier. It's an adjunct. It's a modifier. But look at the first sentence. I put book on the table. So on the table is a prepositional phrase. But we can say I put the book, then we stop. We can say I put the book and then we stop. Why? Because of the nature of the verb. The verb put is different from the verb meet. So I met him at school. The verb meet requires only one object, which is him. I met him at school. The verb meet requires only one object, while the verb put requires two objects. I put the book on the table requires the first object or the first complement, which is the book, and the second complement, which is the preposition phrase on the table, which means that the preposition phrase on the table is obligatory. So it's not only a modifier, it's not a modifier, it's a complement. Why? Because remember what we said about the arguments. The verb put takes three arguments: the subject I, and the first complement the book, and the second complement on the table. While the verb meet requires only two arguments: the subject I and the object him. I met him at school, which means the verb meet requires two arguments I and him, so we don't need at school. But the verb put requires three arguments: the subject I, and the first complement the book, and the second complement on the table. So the difference is that the first preposition phrase on the is obligatory because it has an argument, while this preposition phrase in I met him at school is optional because the verb meet has only two arguments: the subject, direct object, him. So please remember the difference between these two preposition phrases. How can you know the difference? You have to look at the nature of the verb. Does the verb take only two arguments or three arguments? Is, is there any question? Is it clear?
Yes, yes, Professor. It's clear.
And finally, the verb phrase. Can anyone give an example of a verb phrase? You studied the verb phrases in semester 3. Can anyone give us an example of a verb phrase? Yes, Omar?
Sir, my mother has cooked food.
So what is the verb phrase?
Has cooked. Has is the helping verb
Yes.
or auxiliary verb. Cooked is the main verb.
Okay, so verb phrase. Okay, so verb is has cooked the food. Fine. So what do we have in the verb phrase? We have the verb
The auxiliary verb.
and the noun phrase. This is and the noun phrase. Okay. So in a verb, yeah, in a verb phrase. So minimally a verb phrase consists of a single verb, and this is the case of intransitive verbs. Okay, intransitive verbs do not require an object. They require only one argument, which is the subject. Okay, for example, he smokes. So the smokes is a verb phrase. It consists of the verb alone. So the only obligatory element in a verb phrase is the verb. Okay? For example, Ignatius left. So left is a verb phrase and it consists of only the verb. Verbs may be modified by adverbs, adverb phrases. Okay? The adverb may be before or after the verb. For example, let's quickly. Please remember, we have to write here the adverb phrase. Now, to put it simply, you can never start with the daughter. You can never start with the adverb. You have to start with the adverb phrase. You can never start with the adjective. You have to start with the adjective phrase. You can never start with the preposition. You have to start with the preposition phrase. But always start with the mother, which is the phrase. So, in the VP, we may have the verb who's modified by an adverb phrase. Okay? Many of these adverbs appear on either before or after the verb. Okay? And you can have as many adverbs as you like. Here is an example. Ignatius deliberately always left quite early. So we have two adverb phrases before the verb and two adverb phrases after the verb. We have to indicate this in the rule by adding the symbol plus. Okay? Plus. So in the verb phrase, we make the verb be modified by one adverb or more, post modified by one adverb or more. Plus means more. But please, in phonology, plus means a morpheme is added, a morpheme. In syntax, it means more, as far as what we're talking about here. So this is the verb phrase. Okay, two verb phrases precede the noun, two adverb phrases precede the noun, and two adverb phrases follow the verb. Sorry. Now coming back to your question, Mr. Mehdi. So here, look, the verb phrase, the phrase must consist of only one lexical category. Okay? Only one lexical category, which is the verb. This is adverb phrase, 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 phrase. You see now? Okay,
Yes, sir.
only at this level, but not here. Okay, so this is one example. Number 3, the verb phrase contains a noun phrase if the verb is transitive. If the verb is transitive, we must have a complement or a direct object. Okay, for example, he smokes 5 cigarettes a day. So this is the direct object of the verb smoke. So we have to add it here. The NP, and it's optional. Why in this position? Because the NP comes before the verb phrase. Okay? Here's an example. Kiss his mother-in-law quietly. Kiss his mother-in-law quietly. So the verb is followed by the noun phrase, the adverb phrase. Again, only the verb, only the head which is lexical. This is phrase and this is praise. Okay? And remember, terminals are always next to the noun. They are always branched with the noun from the noun phrase. Why? Because the terminals modify only the noun, so they must be branched with the noun. Okay? Any question?
Sir, sir,
Yes, Mark.
in case of a verb phrase has three verb, how we
Sorry,
three?
repeat, please. I didn't hear you. Repeat, please.
If we have a verb phrase containing three verbs,
Yes.
how we can make three diagram?
Example?
Uh, I have been teaching English for a year.
So what are
Have
the
been
two verbs? You have
have been
only
are
one
two.
main. No. You have only the main verb, which is teach. Okay? We'll talk about this case, Mr. Omar. We'll talk about this case. Those are auxiliaries.
Yes,
We'll talk about them next time. Okay? But
thank
you
you,
have
sir.
only one main verb. I was expecting you to give an example like she speaks and smokes at the same time. Okay? This is the case I was expecting you to talk about. For example, she's speaking and smoking at the same time. So in this case, we'll talk about this case of conjunction or coordination. When you have two verbs that are coordinated or conjoined with and, or preposition phrases or noun phrases, etc. This is something we'll talk about next time. Conjunctions, etc.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Welcome. So as I said, we may find two NPs in a verb phrase. For example, I spare the student an investment yesterday. So this is the first complement. This is the second complement. Two NPs. So we have to add that in the rule. Now the rules here. So the verb phrase, we may have as many adverbs as we want. We may have after the verb as many adverbs as we want, but only two NPs. Now let me ask you a question. Why can't we add plus here, the NP? Why do we write both of them? Why? Because at the maximum you find only two noun phrases. But adverb phrases you can have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. Okay? The rule of the adjuncts is recursive. You can have as many prepositions as possible. You can have as many adverbs as possible. But nouns as complements, you can have more than two. Why? Remember what we said about the arguments. You can't have more than two arguments after the verb. Okay? So we're not going to add here because it's impossible to have more than two NPs. But the adverb phrase we have plus because you can have 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Okay? So this is an example. So the VP will have the verb, the NP. Determiner is always included within the NP. Okay? So the first NP, student, the second NP, an embarrassment, and the adverb phrase. Again, Mr. Mehdi, again, the lexical categories. We have the verb phrase, only one lexical category, which is the head. This is phrase, and this is phrase. Okay? Any question? No question?
Clear, sir.
No, it's clear. Clear.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Finally, verbs can be modified by preposition phrases. Here is an example. Both Freckly got his buckets from the store for $1. So these are the components of a verb phrase. So we have the verb preceded by an adverb phrase, followed by the noun phrase and preposition phrases or adverb phrases. Okay. Here we have two again in the preposition phrase. We have to add plus. Please, one we don't need it because it is repeated. So here plus. Why? Because the preposition phrase you can have 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Okay? Why? Because the adverb phrases, the preposition phrases function as adjuncts. Function as an adjunct. And the rule of adjunct is recursive. You can have 3, 4, 5, etc. But the NP, the complement, the rule of the NP is not recursive. I'm talking about the complement. You cannot have more than two complements. Okay, for example, we cannot say she writes a paper, a short story, a novel, etc. Okay, we can do it in this way, but in the tree structure, as we will see in X-bar theory, you cannot have more than two branches. Okay, so for the time being, in the verb phrase, you will find at the maximum only two NPs. And the rule of the adverb phrases, preposition phrases is recursive. You can have 2, 3, 4, etc. Okay? So this is the tree that summarizes this. So in the verb phrase, we have the adverb phrase frequently, then the adverb frequently. We have the verb got, and we have the in his brackets. We have the preposition phrase from, and the NP, the store, preposition phrase, preposition NP, $1. Now, again, Mr. Mehdi, phrase consists of only one lexical category, which is the verb, the head. All other modifiers, including the complement, must be phrasal. So this is a phrase, this is a phrase, this is a phrase, this is a phrase. We can apply the same thing because this is applicable to all phrases. Look at position phrase. There is one lexical category which is the head preposition, and here we have phrase NP. The same thing here. The preposition is the head, and it is the only one which is lexical category, and the NP is phrasal. Except the noun phrase, we have two lexical categories. This is problematic. We'll talk about it in X part here. Any question? Is there any
It is
question?
clear, Professor.
So this is the end. If there is no question, we can stop here. So you have 5 minutes to ask any questions you want.
Sir,
Professor.
excuse me. The exam would be like an essay, or we should decodicate phrases like you are doing?
You have to prepare for any form of the exam, any format of the exam. So not necessarily an essay, but you may have to write a paragraph. And of course, you will be asked to draw trees and maybe also bracketed diagrams, etc. Okay, so it will be part of it written, and part of it you have to account for the trees and ambiguity, etc. Which means you have to practice drawing trees.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Professor,
Yes, Mr. Mohammed?
can you share with us those slides?
I don't think so. Why? Because everything is
Please.
in the book. Everything is in the book. Okay, everything is in the book. This tree is in the book. This rule is in
Yes.
the book. Sentence is in the book. Everything is in the book. I'm just copying them and explaining them. Okay? Everything. This
Just
is
those
in the
slides
book as
are
well.
simplified, and that's why.
Simplify. Not the slides, the
Okay,
explanation.
okay, Professor.
That's what you have to focus on. The explanation, not what you have here. Anyhow, I will think of it.
Okay, Professor. Thank you very much.
Welcome. So next time we are going to talk about the clauses. Please read chapter 3. Read chapter 3. Okay, so no more questions. So we are going to call it a day. Stop here and see you next time.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Welcome. Good luck.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.